The Ninth Legion, the Blood Angels. Primarch, Sanguinius. Allegiance, Loyalist. Homeworld, Baal. Current Commander, Dante. Specialization, Assault and Deep Striking. Battle Cry, By the Blood of Sanguinius, or For the Great Angel. Of the Astartes legions created, the Ninth Legion was noted as one of the most unusual. Though few in numbers, the Ninth was without doubt infamously vicious in the assault. This led to the use as vanguards and shock assault squadrons in the most ferocious of battles for them. Taken from the dredges and disenfranchised masses of Terra, the Ninth Legion was made up of desperate boys in search of purpose, meaning, and a chance for salvation. In fact, there was an entire cult formed from followers of the Ninth Legion who hoped that they or their sons might become members of its ranks. But despite their nature as symbols of hope for the destitute, they were not without flaw. Despite the Emperor seeking for purity in his Astartes, many aspirants showed signs of mutations. There also was a strange habit noted among the Ninth Legion in which the Marines would eat the flesh of their defeated foes, leading to them gaining a title, the Eaters of the Dead. As the Great Crusade was launched, the Ninth Legion proved their capabilities time and time again, being instrumental in various campaigns. In fact, it was noted that the Ninth Legion seemed capable of emerging victorious from even the most brutal of engagements. On more than one occasion, the Ninth would be thrown into hellish battles in which they would lose thousands of their number, only to still emerge victorious, covered in the blood of the enemies of man. This led to Malcador calling them the Revenant Legion. However, their constant bloody battles seemed to be having an effect on the Legion. They were gradually becoming more blood-hungry, more cruel, more brutal. They became obsessed with death, blood, and savage destruction of the foe. They became feared by the Imperium and seemed content to engage enemies at their leisure. In fact, so cruel and distrusted were the Ninth that the Imperium feared providing them advanced or more powerful weaponry, leading to the Revenants relying heavily on infantry-line troops and jump-pack Marines. Their growing obsession with blood and death led to the formation of various cults and splinter factions within the Ninth Legion, who began to grow more violently intoxicated by carnage. If left to their own devices much longer, perhaps the Ninth would have been culled early in their existence. But all of that changed with the arrival of an angel. The Primarch that would be known as Sanguinius was deposited from the warp on a moon orbiting the planet Baal, known as Baal Secundus. Baal was a harsh world of mutant tribes and brutal living. Sanguinius was found as a baby by a tribe called the Blood. Unique among the Primarchs, Sanguinius was discovered with two large white angel wings sprouting from his back. It is unknown if this was a result of warp mutations or if the Emperor's own design was at work, but what is known is that like his brothers, Sanguinius grew quickly and became the master of his environment. He protected his tribe with wrathful dedication, and his nobility and strength were renowned by the people of Baal. Aiding in his battles against the mutants of Baal was the fact that Sanguinius was a psyker with incredible supernatural abilities, including his ability to see the future. With his powers and his Primarch capabilities, Sanguinius conquered Baal for the pure people of that world and became worshipped by them, until the arrival of the Emperor. Sanguinius had foreseen the coming of the Emperor, and when they met, he did not immediately agree to serve him. In fact, he was the only Primarch to ever ask what would happen if he refused to serve, indicating that Sanguinius was a practical man first and foremost. He also stated that in exchange for his service, he begged the Emperor not to harm the pure people of Baal. The Emperor not only agreed to these terms, but said that he knew Sanguinius would aid him because, like himself, Sanguinius sought to save the lost and the needy. Just as the Great Angel had saved Baal, the Emperor wanted to save all of humanity. Pleased with this, Sanguinius swore his loyalty to the Emperor and was brought into the fold of the Great Crusade. However, before he would go to meet his sons, the Emperor wanted Sanguinius to learn about the military ways of the Imperium. He attached Sanguinius to the Lunar Wolves and their Primarch Horus Lupercal. Horus and Sanguinius became fast friends and became as close as true brothers, caring greatly for one another. Further, from the lunar wolves, Sanguinius saw the nobility and strength that Astartes' legion was capable of and was very impressed. However, none were sure how Sanguinius would feel when he met the Revenant Legion, his sons. To everyone's amazement, when Sanguinius met his legion, he started by taking the time to learn the names of every one of them, memorizing their names and their faces. He then gave a speech, but rather than order an oath sworn to him, instead he swore an oath to his own sons. He vowed that he would stand with his sons and beside them no matter what came to pass, and that he hoped he would live up to their expectations and desires for him. His humility, nobility, and compassion moved his once impassive and cold legion to tears, and all swore fealty to him on the spot. However, this was only the first test. Upon seeing his sons in battle, Sanguinius learned why they were known as the Revenant Legion, witnessing the bloodlust and battle fury that they had. Sanguinius knew that they couldn't continue this way. So for a decade he had the Blood Angels, as he came to call them, fight alongside the Lunar Wolves so as to learn from them and adopt their noble and honorable behavior. In time, Sanguinius' work bore fruit. The Blood Angels grew from savage killers into noble and honorable warriors that became examples for the rest of the Imperium to follow. In fact, Sanguinius began encouraging the use of bloodless conquests, in which the angels offer a chance of capitulation to a planet, or suffer a day of revelation. Many worlds that saw the strength of the Blood Angels and the glory that was the great angel Sanguinius would capitulate without a fight. However, not all was truly well with the Blood Angels. Sanguinius came to learn that the bloodlust of his sons was not entirely based on their culture, but on a genetic flaw in their gene seed known as the Red Thirst, an internal desire and need to consume blood. Fearful of others discovering the secret and potentially killing off his beloved sons, Sanguinius kept it a closely guarded secret and did all he could to seek a cure for them. However, before he could, Sanguinius' once closest friend and brother Horus would begin his plans to betray the Imperium, and the great angel would begin his march towards his own destruction. When Horus began his treachery, he knew full well that victory required as few loyalist legions and primarchs on Terra as possible. In particular, he needed 3 out of the way: the Dark Angels, the Ultramarines, and the Blood Angels. Horus feared the destructive weapons and lethal prowess of the Dark Angels, as well as the raw strength of Lionel Johnson. He was fearful of the fast numbers and tactical acumen of the Ultramarines and Robute Guilliman, but perhaps above all these things, he did not want to cross swords with Sanguinius, who he loved most above all his brothers as a true friend and comrade. He knew Sanguinius would never betray the Emperor, and so he wanted him far away. Let him die on another's blade. So as a ruse, he sent the Blood Angels and Sanguinius to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, to a place called Cygnus Prime, where for the first time in the Legion's history, the Blood Angels were confronted by the power of demons. One demon, a greater demon of Slaanesh, Kyrus the Perverse, would issue a personal challenge to Sanguinius and his legion, which resulted in a long and furious battle where the stalwart Blood Angels and the vile demons laid waste to one another. But before Sanguinius could even confront Kyrus, he would face another foe, a foe that would haunt him and his legion long into the future: the greater demon of Khorne, the bloodthirster Ka'banda. Ka'banda would begin by tempting Sanguinius to swear loyalty to Khorne. Sanguinius refused outright and demanded the great bloodthirster stand aside. So, mocking the angel, Ka'banda decided to try breaking his spirit, telling him the real truth. Horus was a traitor. Even now, he was launching a traitorous coup upon the Imperium and the Emperor. He could be part of it, a part of a great event that would change the galaxy. Sanguinius was outraged, believing Ka'banda to be a liar, and the two dueled. It was a very close and furious match. Ka'banda crushed Sanguinius' legs, but Sanguinius impaled the demon through the chest. Ka'banda swore and cursed Sanguinius and his sons, killing 500 Blood Angels in one furious roar of power, sending a psychic shockwave through Sanguinius so powerful it rendered him unconscious. The moment their father was cast down, A strange and dark anger filled the Blood Angels. With a rage unlike anything they'd ever known, the Blood Angels lay waste to scores of demons, their fangs bared and their passions reinvigorated. Any demon that did not fall to their blade fled back to the warp. With the battle won, the rage subsided, but there were now more fears plaguing them. What was that rage they had felt? They'd never felt anything like it before. Was the demon correct? Had Horus betrayed the Imperium? What were these demons? They were not like the Xenos they were used to fighting. They were something else entirely. Eventually, Sanguinius would recover, and his healing powers brought his legs back into full use. But the loss of so many of his sons, and the horrid lies that his brother Horus was a traitor, hurt him more than any leg injury. Sanguinius needed answers, and he would get them. But he also swore an eternal oath of vengeance upon the lying, vile, and detestable Kabanda. Thanks to a message from Rogel Dorn on Terra, Sanguinius' fears were confirmed. Horus, along with several other Primarchs and their legions, had turned traitor. All forces were to return to Terra to aid in the defense, but Sanguinius was stopped in his return by the Great Warp Storm, created by Lorgar to prevent his return. Horus could not risk the Blood Angels, Dark Angels, and Ultramarines arriving to turn the tide. The Great Warp Storm made communication and travel dangerous and near impossible. Fearing that perhaps the Emperor was dead, Sanguinius linked up with Rabute Guilliman on Macragge, the homeworld of the Ultramarines. There, Guilliman proposed an idea to him: Imperium Secundus. A new Imperium in place of the old. If the Emperor was truly dead and the Imperium was no more, humanity needed something new to believe in and rally around. Guilliman proposed that Sanguinius, the Emperor's most beloved son, should be the Imperial Regent, ruler of the Second Imperium. Sanguinius was not fond of the idea, but agreed all the same for the sake of helping humanity. Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels would arrive later, and although Lion raged at the suggestion of creating a new Imperium, he was satisfied when Guilliman explained that Sanguinius would be the regent. Lion had a great deal of respect and love for Sanguinius, and so he trusted him far more than Guilliman. However, no sooner had this Second Imperium been started than faults began to appear. For one thing, Lion and Guilliman did not trust each other to do things correctly, and Sanguinius was forced numerous times to act as mediator between them. Further, tensions were strained when a bombardment was ordered from Lion's flagship upon Macragge. Though Lion said he had no knowledge of it, he confessed the act was likely done as a result of Conrad Kurz, the deranged brother who had been loose on his ship. Even if Lion was not responsible for the bombardment, his unwillingness to share the news about Kurz was enough to make Guilliman furious. But Sanguinius, ever the patient mediator, desperately tried to help them both see sense. But all would change when Sanguinius had a sudden vision. The Emperor was still alive. Terra still stood. But he'd had one other vision. A vision of his own death. Sanguinius told his brothers of all these visions, and immediately Imperium Secundus was abolished. The three Primarchs and their legions raced to Terra, braving the rune storm. While Sanguinius and the Blood Angels made a straight path for Terra, the Dark Angels and Ultramarines would draw the traitor's attention away and swore to rendezvous with him later. Although all knew that Sanguinius was rushing to his own death, and none knew this more so than Sanguinius himself. The Blood Angels composed themselves admirably at the Siege of Terra, and Sanguinius was one of the Primarchs who took an active role in battling the enemies of man. Not only did he confront Kabanda once more and defeat him, Sanguinius also fought and banished his fallen brother Angron back to the warp in ferocious and ruthless combat. The Blood Angels were instrumental in holding the Eternity Gate, as well as deploying reinforcements and extra manpower to secure choke points held by the Imperial Fists and White Scars legions. But time was running out for both the Imperium and Horus. The traitors had managed to breach several key defenses, but Horus had received word that the Ultramarines, Space Wolves, Raven Guard, and Dark Angels were en route to Terra. Horus had to make a desperate gamble. He challenged the Emperor to face him on his ship, the Vengeful Spirit. The Emperor accepted, alongside Sanguinius and Rogel Dorn. Here, Sanguinius would finally confront Horus. Horus would at first try to recruit his brother, but as he suspected, Sanguinius refused. The two fought, but the blessed angel was no match for Horus and the combined strength of the Chaos Gods. Sanguinius was struck down and was killed at the hands of Horus Lupercal. Although the Emperor would in the end avenge his fallen son and kill Horus, the loss of Sanguinius was a terrible blow felt across the Imperium, no more so than the Blood Angels themselves. The moment their father died, every Blood Angel was suddenly struck with visions of Sanguinius' death, and it was not grief that took them, but the rage. The same rage they'd felt when they saw Sanguinius fall unconscious on Cygnus Prime. A horrible, destructive black rage. In this rage they slaughtered everything in their path, friend and foe alike. Racked with full fury, remorse, and vengeance, they did not stop killing until the madness eventually passed. But it was only the beginning of the pain, for the Blood Angels and the Black Rage, as they came to call it, would always haunt the Legion, even into the present age. Without Sanguinius, the Blood Angels would persevere. Without Sanguinius, the Blood Angels would preserve his memory forevermore, living to honor his great sacrifice and his ideals. Despite the Black Rage being an ever-present threat that the Blood Angels have had to contend with, the Angels continue to be examples of nobility, of honor, and of duty to the wider Imperium. By the 41st millennium, a new threat has emerged, the Tyranid Hive Fleet, Leviathan. This Xenos threat was on a direct course for Baal, the homeworld of the Blood Angels. In order to prevent the destruction of their homeworld, Commander Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels, called all Blood Angel successor chapters to Baal to help protect their home. To add more fuel to this wildfire, the Great Rift would open in the middle of this impossible war, leading to demon incursion into the Baal system, along with the return of the Blood Angels' ancient enemy, Kabanda. Indeed, it appeared that the Blood Angels were actually going to face destruction, if not for the timely arrival of the Ultramarines, Robute Guilliman, and the Indominus Crusade. With the help of the Ultramarines, the reinforcements, and the Primaris gene seed, the Blood Angels and their successor chapters were able to turn the tide of battle, albeit helped somewhat by the sudden influx of demons and chaos beasts that spewed forth from the Great Rift, causing Hive Fleet Leviathan to be decimated on two fronts. Leviathan was broken into various splinter fleets, and Guilliman offered the Primaris gene seed to the Blood Angels. There was a hope among the Blood Angels that perhaps the Primaris gene seed would cleanse them of the Red Thirst or the Black Rage, but this was not the case, as the Primaris Blood Angels still showed symptoms. On top of bringing the Blood Angels under his foot, Guilliman appointed Commander Dante, acting Imperium ruler of Imperium Nihilus, on the dark side of the Great Rift. A task he has accepted with honor, but also reluctance. Even now, the Blood Angels continue their endless engagements across the galaxy, and even into the darkest corners, working closely with their cousin Marines, particularly the Dark Angels, who they aided during the Arcs of Omen campaign against Vastor the Archfane and the forces of Abaddon, as well as a returned demon prince Angron. Dante, who attempted to duel Angron, may well have lost his life if not for the timely arrival of Lionel Johnson and the risen Dark Angels, who banished Angron back to the Warp. Although Dante offered the position of leader of the Imperial forces in Nihilus, Lion refused this, maintaining that Dante was the right man for the job. In a way, Sanguinius, who was once trusted as the rightful Imperial regent in place of the Emperor himself, had his glory still shine on today in the form of Dante and his incomparable sons. Once a legion of mindless barbarians intent on carnage, now among the most noble and worthy to call themselves his angels. After the Horus heresy ended and their gene father died, the Blood Angels became shadows of their former selves, falling in line nicely with the Codex Astartes and upholding its doctrines in the same level as reverence to the Ultramarines, thankful to have a form of structure. This means that the Blood Angels adhere to the same structure and makeup as an outline in the Codex. They are comprised of 10 companies, but with one exception, the Death Company. The Death Company is comprised of Blood Angels who are at risk of succumbing to the Black Rage and will be sent on suicide missions to die in glorious battle. The Blood Angels are a well-rounded chapter, although their speciality is in fast assault tactics. The Angels possess an above-average number of jetpack infantry, launching themselves into the enemy with rapid speed and deployment, descending upon their enemies and striking at the heart of the foe. Drop pod tactics are also encouraged, and the sight of the Blood Angels deploying onto a planet in a rain of drop pods is a wonder to witness. Blood Angels also don't tend to stay long after the battle is won, fearing that their dark secrets may be uncovered and finding it better to move on to their next engagement. The Blood Angels put a great deal of focus on melee combat, and while not as infamous for it as the World Eaters or Space Wolves, they are more than capable of holding their own in close quarters. Dante himself was able to hold out for a period against the powers of Angron, albeit only briefly. The Blood Angels have a long-standing history of great warriors, but a few notable examples include Commander Dante, the current chapter master of the Blood Angels, as well as the Imperial Commander of Nihilus, having to maintain responsibility over an entire half of the galaxy. He is an ancient Marine, having lived longer than most others in active service, and his battle skill and tactics are only matched by his wisdom and honor. Dante's a fascinating man who has lived through and suffered greatly in the name of the Imperium. He is one of the few blessed to have had Sanguinius appear to him in a dream to give him instructions and encouragement. However, despite his many accolades, Dante is ready to pass on. He's weary and prepared to die with honor and return to his father, his mortal father, long dead, his gene father who has dreamed of before, and the Emperor whom he's always been faithful to. Among Marines, he has received the recognition and approval of two Primarchs, Gilliman, who named him the commander of Nihilus, and Lionel Johnson, who supported his status. Then there's Mephiston, the chief librarian of the Blood Angels, also known as the Death Angel. Mephiston is arguably one of the most powerful psychers of any Space Marine, even including those of the Thousand Suns. He is one of only two Blood Angels to overcome and survive the Black Rage and emerge renewed from it. During the Second War for Armageddon, he endured 7 long days of agony and torment, coming out the other side possessed by a fragment of Sanguinius' own soul, making him incredibly powerful. He's capable of manifesting wings on his back, creating clones of himself, and even stopping time with his power. He recently has prevented Magnus the Red from launching a certain psychic attack on the fields of Terra itself. And then the Sanguinor, a nigh-mythic figure to the Blood Angels, an entity that appeared in times of the chapter's greatest need. His origins are a mystery to all but a few. It is believed that during the days of Imperial Secundus, one of the Sanguinary Guard, Alatron, was chosen to act as Sanguinius' herald so he would never expose himself to assassins. During a furious fight on the way back to Terra against the forces of demons, Alatron, still wearing the golden visage of Sanguinius, took his father's place and wrestled the warp abominations back into the warp, where he was presumed lost forever. But now a golden angel began appearing at times in the hour of the angel's need, and this entity will appear, devastating the enemies of the chapter with glorious might, only to disappear again, not unlike Saint Celestine to the Sisters of Battle. Thanks to the influence of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels are devoted beyond doubt. Although the Inquisition has been closely watching them for signs of heresy or fall, the Blood Angels are determined to show a duty and devotion to the Imperium that goes beyond normal Space Marines. Few could question the loyalty and strength of will carried by the Sons of Sanguinius. But it is also worth noting that thanks to their rigorous adherence to the Codex Astartes, as well as their constant vigilance towards their flaws, the Blood Angels are highly disciplined as a legion, showing excellent uniformity, a strict adherence to the chain of command, and unquestioned obedience to the rule of law. In events where a leader or commander is killed or otherwise unreachable, they have various systems and fail-safes in place to ensure someone is always in command. Part of this is so that there is no panic or disunity, which would lead to a series of conditions that allow for the Black Rage to manifest. But the Legion has serious flaws, 2 of them to be precise. The Red Thirst. From the very beginning, the Blood Angels have wrestled with the Red Thirst. They must drink blood to survive, and must do so at least weekly. Normally, they can do so through prepared blood packs mixed with wine, but it tastes better when taken from the body of a living creature. For this reason, the Blood Angels possess retractable fangs that they use to drink from defeated dead or willing participants. It was the genetic flaw that led to the Blood Angels being hopelessly afraid of being excommunicated or destroyed, and they still try to guard this secret closely. But worse than even the Red Thirst, the Blood Angels have a unique genetic link to their Primarch memories. At moments of severe psychological or emotional trauma, a Blood Angel may suddenly forget where they are or who they are, looking through the eyes of Sanguinius during the heresy, believing themselves to be in the mind of battle against Horus and the damned. They will furiously, without pause, attack everything in sight with preternatural strength, even for an Astartes, furiously slaughtering friends and foes alike, all the while being completely unaware of what they are doing, believing they themselves are Sanguinius lost in the throes of battle. This is the Black Rage. There is no cure, and once a Blood Angel is lost to the rage, their only fate is death, either at the hands of the enemy or their fellow Blood Angels. The death company of the Angels is made up entirely of those who know they are on the verge of falling to the rage. But that does not mean a healthy brother could not succumb at any moment in the field of battle, regardless of company they are with, which is why chaplains bless and pray over all their charges regularly to look for signs of potential weakness. It is the long-standing goal of the chapter to seek a cure for their affliction, but no such salvation has been found. As of now, only 2 Blood Angels have entered the Black Rage and returned into their own minds: Mephiston and Lamertes, the current commander of the Death Company. So, my personal opinion. The Blood Angels are very similar to the Ultramarines to me in terms of recognition. You know their symbol quickly, and you become very familiar with them. And I do like them, though, a bit more than the Blue Boys, largely because there's actual substance to their chapter. The Red Thirst and Black Rage are actually fascinating drawbacks of the chapter that they have to wrestle with and overcome, making them actually intriguing to follow and root for. They brush the line of Gary's 2 status, but never quite cross it. Although when it comes to their Primarch, I know this may sound really bad, but I find Sanguinius kind of boring. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's cool and all, and I love angelic characters. Celestia, my sweet, one day you'll be mine, but that's beside the point. He really is, though, kind of a Gary Stu with recognized... I mean, let's be real, guys. Everyone knows him for his sacrifice, right? We all know what he did for his sacrifice. Very few personal flaws to speak of with the guy. He's largely only recognized for his sacrifice and death. Personally, I find Commander Dante infinitely more interesting. A remarkable leader who I actually enjoy learning about. I've been enjoying reading his book. The Blood Angels are a legion that I think deserve the recognition they get and are definitely worth becoming invested in. But I gotta admit, it is so funny to me that in the recent update to Warhammer lore, they have this whole thing now where they're trying to focus on the Blood Angels and the Orcs on Armageddon, and they still gotta throw in a few blueberries. Why do we have to keep focusing on the Ultramarines, for God's sakes? Give us some more stuff about the Blood Angels. I want to see more about them. I just think that's so much more fascinating. They are basically Space Marine vampires. How can you not think that's somewhat cool? So at the end of the day, yes, on one level, I do think they are basically Ultramarines painted red to some extent. But there's enough intriguement there, enough interesting there with their flaws and their motif, it's vampires, and their preternatural strength and beauty, that I think there is something unique about them, and I do think they are worthy of the hype. So all of you Blood Angels fans out there, I support you. I dig the Blood Angels. Maybe not for Sanguinius, like a lot of you do, but for other things besides. And that's something you can praise a Legion about, if you can like them for more than just how cool their Primarch is.